begins with a push. And from a speed no faster than a man can run, this Olympic bobsled and the 4 men aboard will reach over 90 miles an hour as it plunges down this mile-long course. Runners flicker over the ice, then bite hard as centrifugal force slams the sled high on the steep walls of the turn. For the men who participate in this most dangerous of all Olympic sports, riding a bobsled is much more than a dizzying trip down a mountain. It is a supreme test of teamwork, delicate technique, and raw nerve. To ride the ice, it's something you never forget. Hi, I'm Sam Posey, and I make my living driving cars like this one. I guess you could say I've always been interested in speed. Although speed will be very much a part of what you're about to see me do, cars and automobile racing won't. I'm going to fly cross-country to Lake Placid, New York, the site of the 1980 Winter Olympic Games, to try to fulfill a lifetime wish to drive a bobsled. Mount Van Hovenberg, where I am now, will be the site for the Winter Olympic bobsled run. It's a famous course, having been first used back in the '32 games. It is also the only course of its kind in all of North America. I'm here on what might be a perilous journey. I want to drive this run and see, sort of as an experiment, whether my skills as someone who has run the Indianapolis 500 and the 24 Hours of Le Mans and many other races would do me any good at all as I try to become a bobsledder. Now, obviously, I'm going to need a coach, and nobody possibly knows this run any better than Paul Lammy. Paul, it's a delight to have you here with me.
Well, it's great to be here, Sam, and I've been a fan of yours for years, and I think that you're going to find that this is going to be an extremely exciting and interesting adventure.
I imagine it will be. Listen, they tell me that you've been very, very successful on this mountain, including winning 8 national championships here.
Well, Sam, I've been very lucky. I've had some top people to ride with me, as well as always having excellent equipment. Of course, the equipment wasn't always the way it is today. The sport of bobsledding, as we know it, started back in 1904, when the world's first man-made bob run was built in St. Moritz, Switzerland. And in those beginning years, and for some time afterwards, the sleds were very crudely made. Aerodynamic features, such as the streamlined cowlings that we use today, are recent refinements. Bobsledding first became a recognized Olympic sport in 1932 right here at the Mount Van Hovenberg bobsled run in Lake Placid. Originally 1.5 miles long, the run was built from stone, which when winter came was covered with blocks of ice hauled in from nearby lakes. Having fewer turns than the European bob runs, the Lake Placid course became the fastest in the world.
If you like this kind of excitement, come along for a ride. Around the glazed icy wall and a mighty close call. Rip-roaring races against time. Steel runners zooming over the glazed course and climbing around icy embankments in a breathtaking and neck-breaking thrill a minute. Frigid and fast, mighty tough sledding. Stan Benham's American bobsled team takes off, followed by Sweden and the Garmisch Sports Festival. The sharp banked ribbons of ice induce breathtaking speeds by careening frozen flyers. The Swedish sled brushes disaster. Winter sport wonders bold and cold.
Sam, this is a four-man sled, and this is the sled that you'll be going down for your first ride on as a passenger.
Well, I see it's up on the scales here, Paul. Why are they weighing it?
Well, in the sport of bobsledding, we have weight limitations. We're a gravity sport, and naturally, the heavier the equipment is, the faster it will go. So we've had to put weight limitations on them. A four-man sled, approximately 2,000 pounds.
Oh, okay.
This is the two-man sled, and this is the one you will be driving.
Driving, yeah, but where's the steering wheel?
Well, Sam, it's been a number of years now since steering wheels have been used in driving bobsleds. The preferred method of driving them these days is to use ropes and handles. An interesting thing about bobsledding, Sam, is that when you first see a run, you're at the bottom of the mountain looking at the finish turn.
In other words, you see the last turn first.
That's right. The track is a mile long and has 16 turns. Sleds will reach 90 miles per hour at the fastest point on the course after Shady Corner. Similar high speeds are also reached before the finish curve. After the finish, the course turns uphill to help slow the sleds. In all, a record run will take just over a minute, during which the sled will have dropped more than 500 feet.
Paul, in car racing, there's something we call the line through the turns, which is, in effect, the way you take the turn. Is there something like that here?
Exactly. The driver comes into the corner at this point, which we call the take-on. It's the first part of the banking, if you will, and he picks a line that he is going to drive the sled through. It must be positioned so that as it starts onto the banking at what's called the take-on, it follows exactly the right trajectory to just beyond the midpoint of the turn. There you start to steer down off the banking to keep the sled from tipping over as the track flattens out. If, however, a driver makes the wrong approach and does not keep the sled down, it will climb the banking and crash into the upper lip. Sam, we're approaching what is probably the most dangerous section of the bobsled run. We're in the bottom of the famous zigzag corner, which is a series of two turns where when you get into the first one, you make a hard, immediate 90-degree turn to the left, transitioning right here to a hard 90-degree turn to the right. Now, people find themselves getting into trouble here by riding the out...
Because, I think I know what you're going to say, because in road racing, we have turns that have a similar configuration. We call them S-bends. And the key thing in an S-bend is that you have to get through the first part of it perfectly, or you're positioned wrong for the second part. Is that the way it is here?
That's exactly the way it is here. And if a sled is too high in the end of this corner right here, they'll find themselves rolling over on their side, and then from there, they're right head-on into the lip of the zag corner. I've seen people killed here. You know, Sam, when we're coming down here on our first trip, I want you to really pay attention and hold on tight through here, because this is a real rough section of the track, and you're going to get kicked around a lot. When the sleds come out of Shady, this is the point where they're going the fastest on the track.
This thing is absolutely amazing, Paul. I mean, it's a vertical wall of ice.
Well, it's 22 feet high, but even more impressive is the fact that when the sleds come through here, they're pulling up to 4 Gs, and that's what's holding them up on the wall.
How high up will they be?
They'll be coming through at about 6 inches below the lip.
And so, in other words, if we were standing here and a sled came through, it would come through over our heads.
That's right.
I mean, Paul, in all the world of sports car racing, there's just nothing like this at all.
Oh, Sam, this is it. The top of the mile at Mount Van Hovenberg of our Olympic bobsled run.
Well, the sled's a beauty, Paul.
Yeah, it's one of our new Olympic sleds.
Oh, I just think it's fantastic.
Let me introduce you to a couple of the guys that are going to be running with us today. This is Al Ashton. He'll be running braking for us. Sam
nice
Posey.
to meet you.
And over here, Freddie Fritsch.
Freddie,
Sam
nice
Posey.
to meet you.
All right, Sam.
Well, you gentlemen seem to have a really beautiful piece of equipment here. Paul, you got to tell me what is expected of me. What am I going to do here?
Okay, well, very briefly, this is going to be your position right here. So get right down behind this pusher and push the sled. Now, when you see me getting into the sled, I want you to start your move in getting in right behind me.
Right after.
You start your entrance to the piece of equipment and work your way right on in like this, very tenderly, and get yourself seated here in the number 2 seat.
Okay.
Then you grab these handles right here, get your feet there, grab these handles and hold on tight. Now, I'm going to want you to be looking over my shoulder so that you can see what I'm doing, and try not to crowd me in here so that I don't have any problems with the steering.
Okay. Well, I wish I could think of another question to ask you, because I think we're Sort of running out of time here. It's about the moment to make the run. I must admit to a feeling of tremendous apprehension because, you know, in racing, the risks are there for me, but I know a little bit what I'm getting into. Here, all I see is the start of a run, and I don't know what's down there.
Well, if you didn't have a bit of a knot in your stomach, and I think that's what you're talking about that you have in racing, then you wouldn't be ready to do this. And so if that's the way you feel, that's the way we want you to. Let's go ahead and throw our helmets on and take the first trip down for you.
The next sled on the line from the mile. Budweiser four-man sled, driven by Paul Lamy, with Al Action on the brakes. Clear the tracks to the mile. The track is clear. And they're off. Along straightaway up.
As the sled picked up speed along the ice, the apprehension I felt at the top of the run turned to fear. As we approached the first turn, I was transfixed by the sight of the ice wall headed toward me. When we slammed into the turn, I was aware of the sled riding up the banking and of the G-forces pushing me into the seat. Paul had told me to watch what he was doing, but as we careened down the course, I realized everything was happening too fast to be comprehensible. There's zigzag. Zig. Zag. I never really saw the second part, but I felt the sudden, unmistakable change of direction. Another curve. The sled seemed to ride the banks only for an instant, then plunge on down the next straight, always going faster and faster. One turn to go now. The speed had multiplied so much, it looks impossible. Ah! We're through. The sled is slowing. It's slowing down. Incredible. Well, Paul, I don't see how you do it. I mean, after the first half of the turn, I mean, I could see the turn coming at me, but after the first half, I virtually blacked out. I mean, the G's, as you slap, there's nothing like that in car racing. Nothing. Gentlemen, thank you very much. That's something to tell my grandchildren about.
Well, we'll go up and do it again.
Oh, let's wait a little while. That's incredible. The next step in my learning process would be to ride with Paul on the two-man sled, with me as brakeman.
In braking, you pull up simultaneously on these two handles, which causes the brake to dig into the ice. The sharp teeth back there dig into the ice, and they're used for either slowing the sled down or bringing it to a complete stop at the bottom of the hill. Now, as we familiarize ourselves with the track, it's always good to slow ourselves down as we learn the course and learn how to negotiate the corners. Once we are proficient and we're ready to let the sled fly, really we're ready to race, then the only function of the brakeman is to stop the sled at the bottom.
But what about the turns?
You never use the brakes in the turns, or you never use the brake when the sled is fishtailing in any way.
I understand.
Half the bobsled race is won from the push on the top of the mountain. And so the brakeman has to get the sled off the top of the hill by pushing on those two handles off the top of the hill faster than anybody else if you expect to win the race. And then his ability to get into the sled very gently, not to cause the sled to slide from side to side, losing time, get into the sled, and then ride the sled to the bottom of the hill. And of course, when we get to the bottom, then
pull
the brakes on. Okay? Let's go.
The next sled on the line from the half mile, a two-man Budweiser sled, driven by Paul Lamy. Sam Posey on the brakes. Clear the track to the half mile. Track is clear.
The moment we pushed off, I realized I didn't feel any of the fear that I had felt riding on the four-man sled. For one thing, this two-man sled, being much lighter, didn't gather speed as fast. The big difference, however, was that instead of being just a passenger, I now had some responsibilities to keep me busy. I had to shift my weight properly in the turns, and my position at the back of the sled meant that when Paul whacked one of the walls, it was like riding a crack the whip.
Making a curve. 212 and approaching zigzag.
Hang on! I was watching for Paul's take-on points and for the split-second timing for zigzag. Lean, lean. Paul's really good. I was aware that I was noticing many more things than I had before, that I could keep my mind ahead of what was happening, anticipating. The finish turn coming up, looking for the take-on, there. I waited for Paul to shout for the brakes, and then I pulled them on. I felt great.
You know, the last 2 times coming down, Sam, I've been going up a little bit higher on the turn. Have you been able to sense a comparison between that and motor racing?
Yeah, I think so, Paul. You know, what it really is, it's the impression of speed that's different. We go faster in cars. It just never feels that way. I suppose this is because the car racing tracks I'm used to are fairly wide. I mean, compared with the ice walls rushing by you on the bobsled run, the reference points around a racetrack are too far away to create the same sense of speed. Also, racetracks are much longer than a bobsled run, but don't have any more turns. And usually, there's at least one long straight on which to get your bearings. In racing, the suspension of the car soaks up the roughness of the track, while the bobsled transmits every bump in the ice right up through the steel runner. The biggest difference is what happens in the corners. In cars, centrifugal force tugs you outward toward the outside of the turn, while in the bobsled, the steep ice banks counteract that centrifugal force, and you think you're being rammed right down through the bottom of the sled. What the two sports have in common more than anything else is that they demand total concentration. There's no time between plays in bobsledding or car racing. You must perform absolutely non-stop, aware that even the smallest mistakes will lead to time irretrievably lost.
Well, Sam, this is the moment that you came here for. How do you feel?
A little apprehensive, obviously, no question about it. On the other hand, I feel as if I've learned an awful lot in a short time. I'm really up for it. I want to do it. I want to make the run. But before I do, a couple of quick questions. One more time, go over these things with me. Where do you want me as we go up onto the turns?
Okay, you're going to be going very slow, so I want you driving through the bottom of all the corners.
Okay.
I don't want you getting up on the ice and the banks or anything like that. Just stay low and through the bottom of everything.
Okay, and how hard will you be using the brakes?
All right, I'm going to be using considerable amount of braking at first. Now, when I sense that you can handle a little bit more speed, then I'll start to let you go.
Okay,
Okay?
let's do it.
Let's try.
The next sled on the line, a Budweiser 2-man sled from the half-mile. Sam Posey driving, Paul Amy on the brakes.
Okay,
Clear the track to the half-mile. The track is clear. And they're off on the long straightaway up on the little left.
Waited for the sled to gain a little speed, and then, gingerly, I tested the steering. The response was vague compared to a car's. Before any real speed built up, I felt Paul using the brakes just as he promised he would.
Approaching the end. Taking a curve. Through X and approaching 12.
The first 2 turns were easy. Then zigzag was coming up. I knew the take-on would be critical, and I had the sled aimed just right. Paul braked again, and the brakes threw us off the line. Got through zig, and I could hear Paul shouting something, and I steered into zag. Suddenly, we were too high on the bank, but I pulled it down, and we were okay. Then we were getting some more speed, and the steering was responding better and better. Another turn, and we were onto the straight with a finish curve ahead. I waited for Paul to use the brakes, and suddenly I realized he wasn't going to. In that instant, the rush of adrenaline seemed to slow everything down for me. As the sled raced toward the turn, I seemed to have plenty of time to rehearse what I would do, how the take-on would be, and how an instant later I'd pull it down off the banking. It was car racing all over again, with that strange way the sense of speed evaporates at critical moments.
Taking a curve. Through. And down.
I did it! I did it! I felt the sled crack hard into the wall on the way out, but we'd made it. And all of a sudden, I was aware of the warm sun and the sled slowing, and Paul pounding me on the back.
Okay, sit there. Good trip. Good trip. You know, you're a bobsled driver.
I don't know about that, but you seem to have made it to the bottom anyway in one piece. You are okay, right?
Sure did.
How much did you have to use the brakes?
Well, if you notice, when we got started, it was a little bumpy in the straightaways.
I noticed.
You were a little bit out of control. That was me on the brakes back there that caused that.
Yeah.
So we used a considerable amount of brakes at the start, and then once you got going, and I sensed that you were handling the corners all right, then I let you go a little bit faster. You know, really, it's the experience that you've had as a race car driver has contributed greatly to your adaptability to this thing. And by the time we got through the finish here, and you're on your own, it was great.
Okay, well, I guess there's a lot left to learn, but Paul, thanks so much.
No,
It was
you're
really fantastic. Well, half speed today, maybe the Olympics tomorrow. Actually, I think I know that that would be impossible. Even in this brief contact with bobsledding, I can see that it is a sport every bit as complex as my sport of automobile racing. And I know how long it took me to be good at that. But this experience has made me fascinated with this sport. And I'm looking forward now very much to the 1980 Winter Olympic Games and to see how our teams, our U.S. teams, do in competition. I wish them every success.